What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Somewhat Sports Podcast. Little different voice than you're used to when it comes to starting off the show. As you guys know, it is me, Jurg, the kind of interim leader whenever it comes to doing the show a little bit differently. And of course, we'll get to that in just a moment. But as always, I am joined by one of our guys here on the show, one of the titans, as he always likes to call us, of the sports media industry. I'm joined by Dame, forever reliable. Dame, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. Hope you're well. Hope everyone else is well. I'm ready for a good show today.
Yes, and we have a good show planned. We're going to have some nice topics of conversation to get into today. But just before we get into that, obviously, it's pretty clear. Just a two-man group today, and I think for one or two more future shows, Chris just has to handle some stuff on the personal side of things, so he will be unable to join the pod with for it may even just be this show. He was telling us about it. It could just be this show, maybe one or two more. So that's a wait and see. But obviously, every Chris, obviously we love you. Whatever happens, whatever is going on, he's going to handle it. And in the meantime, we holding it down. We're going to do all we can because the Somewhat Sports Podcast, it is a team effort. It is some might say family, as Dom Toretto would love it to be. So we're going to take over for our fearless leader. He can take all the time he needs, and we got this lockdown, Dame. We're gonna have a good show today. I already know it.
Yes,
so,
sir.
Like I said, another week where we're really going around the leagues today, Dame. We're gonna start with some NHL news here in a bit. Update on the situation that I talked about last week between the Montreal Canadiens and the Carolina Hurricanes, and a lot of fallout after that situation. Very unusual. It's not common for the NHL offseason to have something like this happen so late into it. Like we're slowly approaching like preseason for the NHL, right? But the fact that a story broke out last week, everything's dropped the way it has. I'm excited. So we'll talk about that, give a little bit of an update. After that, we're going to talk about, speaking of another league that's in their offseason right now, but a trade happened. We're going to talk about a trade made in the National Basketball Association by a team that plays in NYC, not the Knicks. And we're gonna have some fun conversation about that, because I think the topic around that trade, it goes deeper than just the team that made the deal. We're gonna get some good convo about that. And then to wrap it all up, it's been a little bit since we talked about the sport, but Major League Baseball, Dame, we're very quickly approaching the playoffs, about month and a half until we finally get there. And we're, of course, excited for it. So we're going to do a nice little, look at the standings, see where everybody is so late into the season. The two of us are going to take a stab at it and, try to, give our thoughts of how it looks so far, what we could see transpiring. I think ultimately, may or may not give exact, teams that we have making it, but we'll at least give our favorites on who we think has the edge going into the most critical times of the baseball season. Because, of course, Dame, everyone's right now in baseball, they're playing, at least the teams that are still in it, they're playing to make it to October.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Meaningful games this month.
Oh, yeah. And that's what you could ask for in a sport, in any sport. Meaningful games late in the season. It makes people actually want to watch. And for baseball, they need that. So let's get us started per usual with a very quick hockey update for you guys. So last week, in what was just a relatively fun episode that we got to have, talk about some fun and interesting stories that were going on in the world of sports. The interesting story in the NHL world last week was the fact that the Montreal Canadiens restricted free agent Jesperi Kotkaniemi was given a contract by the Carolina Hurricanes, a offer sheet deal. Now, it was just a one-year deal worth about $6.1 million. Again, the true kicker, $20 signing bonus. $20 signing bonus. I love the pettiness of the NHL sometimes. And when we were recording last week's episode, the deal, it was another 24 to 48 hours before we were going to get a final decision on that. Montreal used all 7 days that they had to go over everything, to make a decision. And ultimately, they did make a decision. And it was one that, honestly, as the days went on, it was expected by everyone, including me. My stance on this shifted during the week. At first, I thought, okay, Montreal's probably going to match the qualifying offer, just a one-year deal. You could take it. You could try to make a deal to offload a little bit of salary if need be. But as I read through everything, as I looked at everything, I'm like, oh no, Montreal's not going to match the offer sheet. So Jesperi Kotkaniemi will no longer be a Montreal Canadian, the former third overall pick, funny enough, of his draft, heading over to the Carolina Hurricanes on this 1 year, $6.1 million deal. Fun fact, the same draft that Jesperi Kotkaniemi was picked third by Montreal, the Carolina Hurricanes had the second overall pick, actually. So the second and third overall picks of, I believe it was the 2018 draft, are now on one team together. Funny, isn't it? So you have that 1 year deal. Kotkaniemi is going to be in Carolina. Like I said last week, I feel that his tenure in Montreal, ever since his rookie season, got really rocky. Had a couple injury issues, I think his second year, and then this third year, there was just a lot of inconsistencies with where he was, like, with the team and with the coaching staff. But I actually think, like I said last week, I think Kotkaniemi is a very good young player. I think there's some potential there in the playoffs, actually. The 2 times Montreal's made the playoffs with him being there, in 29 career playoff games, he has 9 career playoff goals. That's about like 33% of the time he plays, he's going to score a goal for you, like just by rough numbers. Like that's the kind of player you want on your team. He's so young, he's talented. There was a significant difference when Montreal actually began playing him last season in the playoffs. So they started off the playoff run not playing him and some of the young guys. It was a very questionable decision. They put the young guys in. And of course, it's not just all on them. There were some good pieces there. And of course, Carey Price carrying everything in net. But at the end of the day, the young guns deserve to play, which it made it all the more confusing when we got to the Stanley Cup final and Kotkaniemi was getting scratched again. Healthy scratched, mind you. So I think the writing, when you really started to look in depth after the initial shock of the offer sheet, because like I said last week, offer sheets rarely happen in the NHL. Aside from this one and even the the Sebastian Aho one from a couple years ago that Montreal tried to do on Carolina, like they don't really happen in the off seasons. We still have some guys who are restricted free agents that are still waiting contracts, funny enough. So it just goes to show how like just wild this was for an NHL offseason, because this stuff never happens. But now Kotkaniemi is going to be in Carolina. I believe a statement, I don't know if it was earlier today or perhaps yesterday as of recording this, that said that Kotkaniemi is going to play on the wing this season in the Hurricanes lineup. I actually love the decision personally. I think they're pretty set at center with the likes of Aho, Nekis, who can play center. Like they're pretty deep center-wise. They still have the veteran Jordan Staal there. Like they're good at center. Why not put him on the wing? You could maybe put him on the line with Teravainen, like I said, maybe Svechnikov, like just him dishing it to Svechnikov and just getting him easy looks. Like that could be beautiful for Carolina. Because of course it was restricted free agent, as it is in all their sports, the Hurricanes had to give up something, and they gave up their first round pick and their third round pick for the upcoming 2022 draft over to Montreal. Now, like I said last week, the Montreal Canadiens, part of the reason why I think they were ultimately going to let Jesperi leave was because there were reports that Jonathan Drouin was likely going to start playing at center this season. And while that is still likely, Montreal clearly had a contingency plan here. This is not something that usually happens in sports. A team acting, having a backup plan? What is this? But Montreal apparently had one, where GM Marc Bergevin, he made a deal with the Arizona Coyotes and traded for center and two-way player Christian Dvorak from the Coyotes, getting him onto Montreal. They traded the first-round pick that they got in the Carolina Hurricanes deal, actually, conditionally. I'll go into the conditions on the pick in a moment here. But they traded that first-round pick and a second-round draft pick in the 2024 draft over to Arizona to get Dvorak onto the team. The conditions on the 2022 pick is simply whichever of the two picks between Montreal and Carolina's is the lower pick. That's what Arizona will get. But still not bad at all by the Arizona Coyotes to swing that kind of deal for themselves. In regards to Christian Dvorak, he is a very good two-way player. And when I say two-way player, I don't mean like a two-way contract. I mean playing offensively and defensively. He has been pretty consistent throughout his NHL career so far, has scored at least 15 goals or more in every season that he's been healthy, which is 70 games or more aside from this past year where there was only the 56, and he played all 56. He's come very close to 40-point seasons before. Like I said, with at least 15 goals every year he's healthy. Not a lot of playoff experience because the Arizona Coyotes only made it once with him, but 3 points in there. But essentially, what he's there for, he's going to be the defensive forward in this lineup now, where you still have some offense there in the likes of Drouin. You hope Toffoli and Anderson can bounce. Toffoli had a good start for Montreal, but hope that Toffoli and Josh Anderson can bounce back and put together some solid seasons. Dvorak is there to handle the defense, be one of those top center guys, most likely. Early on, at least for myself, I'd project for him to be the guy on the second line. He can also actually play the wing, so if Drouin ends up being the center, you could still put Dvorak there with him, or even him and Suzuki together. What a defensive tandem that would be, actually. But overall, I was actually impressed by the Montreal Canadiens that they had this backup plan where this offseason was looking rough for them. They lost Philippe Danol earlier into free agency, where a lot of people thought they were actually going to keep him. And all signs had pointed to he was likely going to stay, but he got the nice contract offer from the Los Angeles Kings. And with Kotkaniemi, they were trying to figure out what they were going to do. I don't know. I don't remember where negotiations were on a contract before the Carolina offer sheet happened, but it just didn't feel like anything was going to materialize there. And then finally, the Carolina thing happens. Montreal looks at it. And like I mentioned last week, so with the situation, had Montreal matched the offer, they wouldn't have been allowed to trade Kotkaniemi at all this season. And if they were going to try to qualifying offer him next year, the base qualifying offer would have had to have been at $6 million. So I think overall it was the right move for the Montreal Canadiens to do that, to let him go. And they get Christian Dvorak back. Not a bad piece to get back. Could you argue a bit of an overpayment? Yes, but at the same time, with that situation, they probably had to end up giving that. And not a bad contract at all. Still 4 years left at a cap hit of just below $4.5 million. For a two-way player who could get you 40 points, that is very valuable on a team that needs some defense, especially as they lost so many pieces this offseason. To get a little bit of defense back in there, I think is very good. So despite the fact that they lost like I said, I still believe a promising young player. Great rebound by Montreal. And I just think a strong way to end off the offseason after it was going to look like a complete disaster. And you could still honestly argue it wasn't that great of an offseason for them. I certainly won't argue against that because they lost so much. But getting Dvorak back here at the end, that's not a bad consolation for all that's happened, solidifying the center group, which is a big part of why Montreal made their deep playoff run. Centers in hockey are important when it comes to the playoffs. Goalies and center and a top defenseman. Like if you have those four positions relatively set, you have a chance at a run. In Montreal, of course, they need to fight for a playoff spot this year. But that will be for future conversations when I really get into detail of what the upcoming season will look like. That's for a future episode. Maybe some writing too. But we're going to move on from that ultimately. And with the NHL update coming to an end, we move on to the next league that is currently in the offseason right now. Same situation. Felt like the dead center of the offseason. We're just waiting on preseason to get going here in the NBA. And we get a little bit of a trade that breaks here. So I'm going to list the details really fast. And then, Dame, I'll throw, the questions immediately to you. The Brooklyn Nets made a relatively surprising deal. DeAndre Jordan and 4 future second-round picks, along with $5.78 million, was sent to the Detroit Pistons for Jahlil Okafor and Sekou Doumbouya. Detroit plans, at the time plans, of course, they officially did work out planning a buyout for DeAndre Jordan and what was remaining on his contract. Meanwhile, according to the tweet from Adrian Wojnarowski when this deal came out, the Nets saved $47 million in both salary and tax on making this deal. So, Dame, I'm going to throw this straight over to you right now. How shocked were you to get this notification? Because obviously this late into the offseason, how big does it, deals like this, not big per se, but somewhat notable, somewhat important. These deals don't really happen. So what were your thoughts when this deal first broke through, and what do you think of it overall for both sides?
At first, when I saw it, I was pretty shocked because when the Pistons were trying to trade Sekou. I'm not going to even bother saying his last name because I'm just going to call him Sekou. I know they were trying to trade him, but I didn't see the Nets as a team that was interested in him, so that was kind of surprising to me. But when it goes to be based off what I think it does for the Nets, I think it's a good trade for the Nets because it adds some youth to that team. Obviously, maybe Sekou hasn't lived up to the potential of the first round pick he was, but he has shown flashes of the player he could be. So adding a player like that to a bunch of proven players on the Nets will definitely help not only the Nets but Sekou himself and his growth. Because he's going to have a lot of easy opportunities. He's going to have a lot of great leaders on his team teaching him the ways of the NBA and how to be a great player. So for him, I like it more than I like it for any of the teams involved in the deal because I do think he's really going to whatever potential he does have, truly, I think he will reach it with the Nets because of how easy the players around him will make it for him. The Nets did give a 4 second-round picks, so they're kind of asset strapped anyway when it comes to future trades. But now it's kind of like that's it. This is the team they have. Everything else is going to be minimum deals in the future, and the mid-level exception. I don't know what they could possibly trade going forward. But like I said, they got a youth. They got a nice long athletic forward to put on the wing. He could defend. He can show athleticism and youth. For the Pistons, I don't know what they're really. I don't know why they gave up on him so early. Didn't really make sense to me. Like I don't think anyone with the 4 second round picks that they got in the trade is going to be anywhere near the potential that Sekou does have. So that was kind of confusing to me. But then again, you got to think about it. Like it is the Pistons, so you can't really let anything by them. But yeah. So I like it for the Nets a lot. I like it for Sekou, the player himself, and the Pistons is just always questionable with them.
Right, right. So when like you said, when you look at this deal, it was definitely surprising. I'm not. I'll say this. I think we can agree. The least surprising thing was the Nets wanting to move on from DeAndre
Yeah,
Jordan.
yeah, of course.
Just his age. Like there's players there that can take up the role, especially with the offseason they had with the draft that they had. They drafted a big man in the first round with the trades that they made to get a second first round pick so late. You have that Claxton is still there, and he's essentially a younger DeAndre Jordan. I hate to put all the players in the same mold like this, but rebounds, some defense, a little bit of athleticism. As long as he doesn't shoot 35% from the free throw line, then I think Claxton will be just fine in terms of starting there. I think the only thing that probably surprised me is the fact that his closeness to Kyrie and KD. But then I think they probably asked, like, are you cool if we end up trading him? And I would imagine, just with how the league works today, I think there was an okay given by the two of them. Or at the very least, it's like, yeah, go ahead, do whatever you want. We really don't care anymore. So in regards to that, that was the only shocking thing when kind of like you. So at first with Sekou Doumbouya, like I liked him coming out of the draft personally. Like I still think there's some potential there. He could be a good player. I think he's one of those guys, Dame, and we're seeing a lot of players in this mold in the last couple of years. Like you need to find the position that works best for him, right? Like yes, it's nice to have these versatile players, but you need to find one position to put them at on a night in and night out basis. So it just helps their growth and their consistency. And I think the thing in Detroit was that there were times where he started at the 3 and times where he started at the 4. And it's vastly different, the 3 and the 4, in terms of the offense that you need to play, the defense that you need to defend, like who are you guarding? And of course, Detroit being just a bad overall team didn't really help him out either. And when he first got there, like there was a logjam at the power forward position, if I'm not mistaken. So I just think so many factors ended up in Sekou not having the greatest 2 years there. And I think the number one reason ultimately of why he was traded was the current GM, Troy Weaver. He got the job after Doumbouya was drafted. And this is a common thing that you see in sports where, GMs will come in and they're going to clean house, right? And Sekou, like, despite the fact he is young, he's not one of Troy Weaver's guys. He's not a Troy Weaver draft pick. I think actually from what I was reading, he was the last Detroit Pistons draft pick from prior to Weaver taking the job. So all things considered, I just think the idea of that, was to him, as well as getting rid of Jahlil Okafor, because going back to last offseason, the Pistons signed a lot of bigs, and I think they wanted to try to avoid that kind of logjam again, so they just ultimately said, okay, let's give up some guys here, Sekou being one of them, Jahlil Okafor. We're not worried too much about depth for them. We're not expecting Detroit to do much this season. Like, they'll hopefully not be last place. At least, hope for Cade Cunningham's sake they won't be in dead last, but I think that was the idea there, just ultimately clearing out the team a little bit. Now it's a full Troy Weaver squad, right? And like you said, like the 4 second-round picks, I think that was just a throw-in because when you look at it from the other side, Brooklyn needs to incentivize the deal, right? They need to incentivize Detroit to take it, and that's where the 4 seconds and the $6 million was, because ultimately the Pistons and DeAndre Jordan did reach a buyout, and DeAndre Jordan, from all reports I've read, like he is going to the Los Angeles Lakers. So I think that was the big portion of it. So really not too much else to say on Detroit's side of things from the deal. But I'm kind of with you. It's sad that they gave up on Sekou, but this is a common tactic, like a general manager likes keeping their guys, and he got unlucky the fact that he wasn't. Yes, he was young, but at the end of the day, like it's familiarity, and they want to have the players that they personally had a hand in selecting. Because now I think that this is a funny stat, Dame. I think the longest tenured Piston now on the roster is Killian Hayes.
That's wild.
Like it's amazing. It is just absolutely amazing. Like forget just the youth on that team in general. Like when they were brought onto the team, Killian Hayes, I think I read, is the longest tenured Piston right now, which just to me is pure comedy. But so moving away from the deal exactly, I want to, like I said at the start of the show, I want to move into what I think is the bigger conversation regarding this deal, right? And I want to, and Dame, I think this is perfect for you because you're a fan of one of the two teams that takes the topic here. The Brooklyn Nets and the Los Angeles Lakers, despite what everyone was saying in the offseason about limited cap space, not a lot of draft capital to do moves. And of course, this is still relevant for future deals, but for right now, which was an offseason that a lot of us were wondering, like, what are the Nets and Lakers going to do to surround their superstars, right? Both teams have made out like spades in the offseason here. They really have. So I just kind of want to get like your take on all this, Dame. Like, how have the Lakers and Nets just been able to do this despite all the expectations from people thinking that they were going to fail? They just were able to have, you could argue, two of the best like 4 or 5 off seasons out of anyone this summer.
Oh yeah, for sure. I know a lot of people like they didn't know what the Lakers were gonna do this offseason. They were like, damn, they're so screwed. Like they're just gonna get older. Like this is the end of Lakers like championship contenders. You can say kind of the same about the Nets, but like just the fact that they had KD, Harden, and Kyrie, they're gonna be contenders anyway. But it's like they gave up their core for Harden. They really weren't going to be able to rebuild it back. But you see, both these teams had really great off seasons. Adding Patty Mills, adding Sekou. Who else did they add? I forgot. I feel like I'm missing somebody.
In the draft, they acquired.
The draft, right?
Cameron Thomas.
There you go.
Yeah.
Like, you thought they lost all the draft picks, and yet they had another one. On the Lakers side, like I can't even get into all the moves they made. They literally rebuilt their whole. It feels like they have an entire new 15-man roster outside of LeBron and AD. And especially bringing in DeAndre, based off the trade and the buyout, like DeAndre Jordan is a really good pickup for them. I thought they were really missing another big athletic big behind AD and Dwight, because obviously AD we know doesn't like to play center. So you have Dwight for that, but you kind of need to back him up in case of injury, in case of foul trouble. Like we know these bigs getting a lot of foul trouble. So adding a guy like DeAndre Jordan as that like third big man off the bench, clearly he was okay with the role because I'm sure the Lakers went out to him and be like this is what we need you to do, and he was fine with it. He wants to be in the championship contender. And a chance to win his his first championship actually. But yeah, so I think both these teams did things that people didn't expect them to do, and they're going to be even better than they were last year. Obviously, neither team made the finals, but it was based off injuries. A lot of people did think these teams are going to meet, but injuries kind of stopped that. So hopefully, they both stay healthy, and we have an absolute monster of NBA Finals this year.
Right. I gotta love what both teams have done. Like coming into the offseason where there were so many questions, and even early on when you think about it. With the Nets, they were pretty quiet with everything going into the draft, right? Like you didn't know what they were going to do with their draft picks. You didn't know how they were going to fix things still because you saw when guys started to go down, they needed extra, right? They needed depth. And same with the Lakers with LeBron getting injured and AD getting injured. Like overall, both teams, like they needed to get depth. And man, did they just succeed at that this offseason. And not just with veterans. Like here's the thing. So you point out the fact that all the veterans going to these two teams, right? But the youth that these teams also acquired is so big. Like for the Nets, it was the 2 first-round draft picks that they had, trading Landry Shamet for that other first-round pick. While a lot of people were confused at the time, I think easily has become the right move because you get another cheap rookie contract on that team for 4 years where you're going to have to focus very soon. Like Kyrie and KD's contracts are coming up, like I think after this year, it's the player option years. So you have that for them. With the Lakers, they were able to get Malik Monk, Kendrick Nunn on cheap deals. They re-signed THT. Like for all the veterans we're talking about with these two teams, like the young players that they acquired as well, I think are going to play pivotal roles in these rotations. But it just all comes down to the fact that like everyone, for the most part, we were kind of going ding dong, the witch is dead on both sides. People were celebrating the fact that the Nets lost. Heck, even on this podcast, we were all like, Milwaukee, can you just do something? Of course, they ended up going all the way. But at the time in the second round, like we were all scared, like, what the hell's going on? We're like KD by himself, essentially, because there was no Kyrie and like James Harden with one hamstring. KD by himself was about to get the Nets to the championship. And then on the Lakers side, obviously they lost, and we were all celebrating that. And then on the Lakers side, it was LeBron going out in the first round for the first time ever in his career, and everyone trying to bury him for that. And then they just respond with honestly, I would argue the 2 best off seasons of any teams this year. Like I know Chicago has a lot of people excited. I know some teams rebounded well. Miami had a decent off season, but I think you can't say any 2 teams aside from the Lakers and the Nets had as definitive winners. Like, you can't poke a hole in what they did. You just can't. And that makes me wonder, Dame, actually, like, not that this will create a big deal, but like, how much complaining do you see out of NBA fans next season on social media? Because I think a lot of people are going to complain about both these teams and how they did it in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, Chris isn't here, but he's one of them, and we kind of talked about this in a few episodes ago about the kind of putting a restriction on the whole buyout market thing. Like, obviously, we don't know the logistics that we could do, or we don't know what the like rules are in the NBA, but like, I also agree that there should be some kind of buyout restriction, so we don't have everybody going to like the Nets and the Lakers. Like, I don't know what it could be. I don't know if there should be like a pool for the amount of money in a buyout market or something like that, but definitely some kind of restriction of that. If you see this kind of offseason like we just had going forward, like, you're definitely going to see some kind of restriction put in place to like limit these things.
Right. And I think this is funny because, I just finished all the hockey talk earlier, but, you heard this because you were getting into the playoffs a little bit, you and Chris, Dame. I'm sure you heard about the Tampa Bay Lightning at one point in the playoffs, like, $18 million over the cap space, because that's what they technically were in the playoffs. But the playoffs doesn't matter. The salary cap doesn't matter in the playoffs for the NHL, which is like, that's something that a lot of people are like, are they ever going to address that? What are they going to do? Da, da, da. Me personally, my whole thing is that they play within the rules. And it was like that with Tampa Bay, and they've won back-to-back cups. And now the way I see it, it's the exact same thing in the NBA here. The Nets and the Lakers aren't breaking any rules, They are straight up just playing within the rules. Like, a player gets bought out, they get him. They get to sign him. There's no, rule bending that they need to do. There's no biases. They just get the players. Like, DeAndre Jordan going to the Lakers. LaMarcus Aldridge, correct me if I'm wrong, like, he's come out of retirement. Like, he's signed with the Nets again. Oh, yeah. So it's like, with both these teams, you could complain, but at the end of the day, it's just the best teams are getting all the depth that they need to contend. And that's usually what happens in sports. Let's be real here. Like, the best teams, the reason why they're the best is because there are people there that run it well. And I think Nets management has proven to be competent. And the Lakers, while you can question Rob Pelinka, I think he's done at least a solid enough job. Plus, LeBron is there. Like, I think people forget, Dame, like, and let's kind of let this be the last point. At the end of the day, this is the superstar era. This is the player era. And the superstars run this league. And anyone who's anyone will gladly take a pay cut to go play with some of these guys. And LeBron and KD are two of those guys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, LeBron has always been known for, like, that recruiter kind of guy. And now you can see it with KD, Harden, and Kyrie being the same thing as well. But you saw in his days in Miami, you saw in days in Cleveland, like, now you see with the Lakers, like, anywhere these great players go, like, people are going to want to play with them. Not only for the championship, but it makes them look better as well so they can get another payday. Like, LeBron's known for getting guys paid. You see him get JR paid. You see him get Tristan Thompson paid. Caruso got more than what he really is probably worth, in my opinion. Like, he gets guys paid. That's what happens when you play great players and you win.
Yeah, and that's just one of the talents of being one of the best for as long as he's been. So, yep. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like people keep complaining, but like these guys are just going to go out there and they're going to go do their thing, and they are going to be competing for championships next season, and that's pretty exciting. And hey, to circle back to where the original point of this was, good for Sekou. He's on a good team now. Well, I know you kind of like, this will be like the last topic. Like, let's just go back to the trade here just really fast. Like, I know you kind of mentioned it, Dame, but like, it's going to be really good for Sekou to be on a good team, because I think like just being on bad teams here, like that's just such a downfall for a player sometimes, where I think like it's going to be good for him to get back to be on a good team here for the first time in his NBA career.
Absolutely. Like I said, like if you're around great players, you get better. You have open shots, everything's easier for you. So that'll help him in his reaching his potential, as well as when his payday comes, you get paid.
Yeah, and a lot of young guys taking that risk on the Lakers. These young guys on the Nets are going to get to play with these players. Just beautiful what both teams did. And I think as we slowly approach, the NBA discussion will ramp up, in the coming weeks as we get closer to the season. We definitely can't wait for that. But I got to say, I like what the leagues are doing here. Give us a little bit to talk about late into the offseason, because this doesn't happen. Like,
this is like the dead point. This is like the dead point of the offseason, where you're kind of just like, it's like dragging on. You're just waiting for the season to start.
It really does. Like late August, early September, like that's the dog days of the NHL and NBA year-round calendars, right? Because You have the preseason, regular season, playoffs, and then you have the immediacy of the offseason with the draft and free agency, and then eventually, and the NHL doesn't have this, but the NBA does with summer league, and then we just hit a lull, right? And we've been in that lull for a bit, and now we get a little bit of news to talk about here. We're definitely grateful of it. That the leagues, while we get past these dog days, we're slowly approaching the beginning of a new year, and we're excited about that. But speaking again past the dog days, the Major League Baseball, Dame, has just about gotten past the dog days of summer that they had here, and it kind of went by really fast, just like summer itself did. So it's like you didn't really notice that this year, at least I didn't. But Major League Baseball is quickly approaching the final month and a half portion of the season. Essentially, about 20 or so games left for every team, give or take. Maybe a few like 25, 24, but it's all within that range. About 20 to 25 games left for all teams here. And of course, at this point, we all know the teams that are just purely out of it, that they are just going to be hoping for good, decent off seasons and good drafts here upcoming. But a lot of teams, Dame, still have skin in it when it comes to the playoff discussion. So we're not going to be predicting teams here necessarily speaking, but we're going to look at each divisional race in the American League and the National League and kind of just give our thoughts to what we're seeing here so far. And I think for myself, Dame, I think let's get some of the easy stuff out the way when it comes to the American League before we get to the juicy stuff, and we'll do the same thing with the National League as well. We want to talk about the intriguing divisions, of course, before we talk about the not so intriguing ones. So we will start off with the AL Central.
Yeah, that division's over. Like, it's the White Sox division.
The only reason why it's not truly cut up is because they by numbers, right? Like this, Dame, I've always said this every single time. Like, even though it's not on the standings graphic, we know who's going to win the division.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, let's be real. It's the Chicago White Sox division at this point, 11 games ahead of the Cleveland baseball team. I know they have a new name, but I already forget it, so I'm just going to call them Cleveland baseball team. I'm just going to call them the baseball team. But Cleveland is the only other team that's at 500 in this division. The rest of them, kind of like we said, Dame, they would be below 500 teams.
It's such a bad division. Oh my god!
With the Tigers, the Royals, and the Minnesota Twins. Definitely, when the season's over, we're going to get into disappointments and surprises from the season. And I think both of us, to an extent, we have at least an idea of who is disappointing in this division. But overall,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, overall, it's the White Sox. They are the leader in this division. They will more likely than not hold it all the way through. So, moving on from the idea of the division with them, the next thing coming up is the fact that they will be, so once we get to the playoffs, we're returning to the traditional playoffs this year in Major League Baseball. So it's only 5 teams.
Thank God.
The 3 division winners and 2 wildcard teams. And as of right now, assuming things hold to form, obviously, the White Sox would be 3rd of the division winners. Right now, the Tampa Bay Rays, they are the AL leader by far, and I believe they're pretty close to the best record in Major League Baseball. They're just like a game behind the Giants for it. So the Rays are number 1. The Astros are number 2. They're 81-57. The White Sox are 80-58. So like I said, anything can happen. Chicago and Houston, they're going to be battling out for it as time comes. But to this point, we have to believe and assume here that the likely playoff matchup we'll see in round 1 is White Sox and Astros. So, and we're kind of mentioning a little bit of the Astros here, so we can sort of knock the AL West out of the picture, at least the top seed here. Dame, if we do end up getting White Sox and Astros early on to this point, who would you kind of give that edge to in the series as we're reaching towards it?
I'm gonna go with the White Sox. I just like their pitching better, and I think pitching is so much more important in the postseason than it is in the regular season. I know Lance Lynn is a little banged up right now, but he's out. He's just on a 10-day IL, so I'm sure he'll be back. Him, Giolito, and Carlos Rendon have been absolute studs this season. Astros got Greinke, and they got a bunch of just guys. So I don't know how much I really trust. I know their hitting is great. White Sox hitting is really good too. So, and they have the elite bullpen. So I'm gonna give the edge to the White Sox if it comes down to that.
Right, and I think baseball, out of all the sports here, Dame, and if you feel like that, I personally feel this way. Home field advantage is kind of 50-50, right? Like, yes, it's nice to be able to play in your home crowd, and if it does get to a Game 7 or Game 5, at least in the divisional series, you want to have you want to be able to play at home, but it's not as impactful to me as it is in every other sport. Like I feel like in basketball you can tell of the environment that gets created for a home playoff game. You can tell it in hockey. You can tell it even in football. Baseball, I think, is kind of hard. So if the White Sox, let's say they remain the third seed, let's say Houston has home field advantage for the best of 5 series. Like you, to me, that doesn't give the Astros any sort of extra edge, right? If anything, like Chicago, they'll kind of take the underdog role in this one, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they've been the underdog since the whole cheating thing happened. Like everyone's kind of been against them and don't think they're as good. But listen, they're top of the leaderboards in every hitting category this season, so you can't take that away from them.
Right. And for the Astros, you need to have that kind of hitting when it comes to the White Sox. Because like you said, the White Sox pitching, if it wasn't for these like second half of the season injuries, like the AL Cy Young Award could potentially be going to a White Sox pitcher.
Yep.
Like that's how good the pitching has been. With both teams, I also think it's relatively worth noting. The reason why I bring it up is just the of who could get home field advantage there is because when I look at the records, it's both teams are very good at home, right, between Houston and Chicago. But Chicago 34-34 on the road. Houston is 38-32. Now it is just a couple games above. But do you put any stock into that, Dame? The fact that at least, from the sample we have, which is 162 games, like if the situation goes to that deciding game 5, if the White Sox are the home team, or excuse me, if the White Sox are the away team, like how much of a disadvantage is that to them really?
Well, Astros have been known for cheating at home, so I'd kind of stay away from that location. But as for these two crowds, I mean, I don't think any of these crowds are known as like some of the best crowds in baseball, so I wouldn't really put in any stock into that. I'd just go with the better team because I don't really. Astros crowd is good. White Sox crowd, maybe they're a little more hungry because they really haven't had taste of the playoffs in a while. Mm-hmm. So maybe that'll kind of give that team the edge, like that motivation, especially and the fans too. But other than that, I don't think any home field advantage really matters for either one of these teams.
Right. This is just going to end up being about who's more talented, whose talent shines more. Is it going to be the pitching of the White Sox or the hitting of the Astros? And that's something we'll definitely look forward to. And again, like if this does end up being the matchup, because in the AL West, as we're about to get to, it's a little bit closer the division race than compared to the AL Central. That's ultimately what that matchup would be about. But again, I personally talk about things we would love to see. I would personally love to see it because I think it would just be some electricity there. You have just Carlos Correa on the Astros. You got Tim Anderson on the White Sox. Like there's talented players on both sides. I think it'd be an underrated, entertaining series to me. I think it could definitely go like to 5. But moving on to the AL West here, Dame. So we've said all we need to say about the Astros. If you want to add in anything about them, with this next question, you can. But right now, they are the leader at 81-57 in the AL West. As we are recording this, we're recording this actually on a Wednesday, because Thursday, this upcoming Thursday, it's not going to be a hot day for us. So, we gotta get this recording in early. But right now, the Astros are ahead. The Seattle Mariners, to this point, are 6.5 games back of the Astros. The Oakland A's are 7 games back of the Astros. Now, still, like I said, plenty of time, about 20 games or so left 20 plus games left in these seasons, for these 3 teams. Dame, do you give any chance of the Mariners or Athletics to potentially catch the Astros? And if so, like, what would help these teams? Like, what's going to be the deciding factor in one of them potentially catching up to Houston?
No, the Astros just has to be like suspended for cheating again or something like that. The Mariners, I think, are overachieving team that I don't really have much faith in. And Athletics were really good throughout the season, but now this past month they kind of fell off. So this is kind of, to me, it's almost as runaway as it is for the White Sox in the Central. It's the Astros division.
Right. And as I look at the division, I need to say this, Dame. When the hell did the Seattle Mariners get to second place?
No clue, bro. No clue. I don't know when they got good. It makes no sense.
This has to be. I know. I said we do it in a future episode, but I think my early surprise needs to be the fact that we're this late into the season. The Seattle Mariners actually have a snowball's chance in hell, technically speaking, to make the playoffs. Like I think that's highly entertaining. Kind of like you, I think with the Astros and this division, yes, the race is closer than the other divisions. This is actually aside from the the NL West is a different story. So. In every other division besides the NL West, this is one of the next closest ones, the only other one being the NL East. So while it's pretty close in the AL, I think in the AL West, I think ultimately the Astros, just the talent that they have, like you said, the pitching it's solid. It's not as great as it was in previous years, but I think overall it's good enough for the Astros to make by. And like you said, you're up there for the hitting this entire time. Yes, even if they have like a bad 3-game stretch, they could just bounce back easily with like a good 7-game stretch where their guys get going. So I just think talent wise, the Astros are just far and away the leaders there. But the Mariners and the A's, they still have some discussions here when it comes to potentially making the playoffs because they're both in contention well enough for the wild card. So kind of moving on to the last division here, it's the American League East, the Tampa Bay Rays, the New York Yankees, and the Boston Red Sox, and even the Toronto Blue Jays. Like that, one of the strongest divisions in Major League Baseball, just based off of the 1 through 4 there, is those 4 teams. Tampa Bay, 88 and 51. We don't really need to deliberate too much. I think we could both agree, like, that's Tampa's division to technically lose, but they most likely won't. 9.5 games ahead of the Yankees, 10 ahead of the Red Sox, 88 and 51. Like I said, they have a very small amount of games left. They're well on their way to clinching the AL East. So let's move on to the rest of those teams. Let's go to the AL wildcard here, Dame. As of right now, and Dame, I know you'll enjoy this, but if the playoffs were to get started today, it would be the New York Yankees against the Boston Red Sox in Yankee Stadium for the 1-game wild card, right? The next closest teams, so the Yankees are 78 and 60, the Boston Red Sox are 79 and 62, the Toronto Blue Jays are 75 and 62, and like I said, the Mariners 75 and 64, the A's are 74 and 64. So, kind of want to give those teams their fair credence because the Blue Jays are just 2 games back of the second wild card spot, I believe. The Seattle Mariners are 3 games back, and the Oakland A's, it says 3.5 games back from the graphic that I'm looking at. Dane, before we really talk about the top 2 teams, when it comes to the Blue Jays, Mariners, and A's, do any of them have a shot at knocking off the Yankees or the Red Sox, or like is the wild card just destined to be those 2 teams?
I do think the Blue Jays, of these 3 teams, have the best chance. Like I said, I'm not a believer in Seattle, and the A's have kind of fell off. But the Blue Jays are getting hot at the right time. Like you see, there's a lot of baseball seasons. Like a team gets hot at the end of the year and they sneak their way into the playoffs. That's what I think is happening with the Blue Jays. My prediction is going to be the Yankees versus Blue Jays. I do think the Red Sox are going to fall off and not be in the wild card game. I didn't think before the season they were going to be a good team, and I think they've also overachieved a lot this season. Like I do think they're a very good team, but my bold prediction is going to be that the Yankees will be hosting the wild card game, and then it will be against the Toronto Blue Jays.
Interesting. So I want to talk about Boston a little bit because the both of us actually prior to the season we didn't have them as a playoff team here. We didn't have them competing for the American League East. I really wish I could remember off the top of my head what we did have, but ultimately, Boston wasn't in our playoff pictures prior to the season. As the season has gone on, we've said like, oh, they've made good progress here. They've done good. Like the hitting of that organization, that's the reason they got to this point this season, right? Like, yeah, the pitching's been fine here and there, but the hitting, kind of like you said with the Astros game, like Boston's hitters really revived the season. JD Martinez has looked good again. Bogarts, all the hitters there, they've done well. But so here's my thing, and this is what I want to key in on, because this will be key conversation for the rest of the divisions here. But how big when it comes to the pitching here, like I think part of the reason you're picking the Blue Jays over the Red Sox there is that like you kind of think the Blue Jays pitching at least has a slight edge over Boston, because we've had questions about Boston's pitching staff the whole year.
Yeah, that's definitely. You have Ryu, you have Robbie Ray, who's a Cy Young candidate at the end. Steven Matz has been really good for them this season. Like I do think their pitching is definitely better than Boston, and they have the hitting to match up with them too.
Right, and I think it would definitely be interesting. I think more likely than not, we are ultimately going to see an AL East showdown there, and then we'll get an AL East showdown in the 1 through 4, 1 versus 4, because like I said, the Rays most likely will finish off with the number 1 seed in the American League, and they're going to be awaiting a AL East team in either the Yankees, the Red Sox, or the Blue Jays. How entertaining it would be. I think an underrated game, we're talking about underrated games and series here. I think underrated game of the 4 teams, so let's assume the Yankees keep that top wild card spot, right? I'm going to assume Garrett Cole's going to get the start there for the wild card game. Of those 4 teams, Red Sox, Blue Jays, Mariners, and A's, it's the Blue Jays that gives you the biggest fear, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look at the past 2 games where they smacked the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. And yesterday, Garrett Cole pitched and he lost the game. He came out because of injury, but they were losing when he came out. Like the Blue Jays absolutely do scare me. although their pitching is good, like the hitting is what scares me most out of the teams left. So I definitely would fear them the most. I hope it's not them. I'd rather the Red Sox. I think the Yankees have the Red Sox number, and Seattle and the A's just aren't good. But
Right.
I'm hoping it's not the Blue Jays, but I do fear it will be.
Right. And, you know, quick shout out to the A's and Mariners. Like, good for you for still being in it this late in the season, especially to Seattle. But I just, like, we can all agree, even if they make it to the wild card game somehow by hook or by crook, even if they go against Boston, I think I would still take Boston over those two teams because it just.
Absolutely. I'm taking any AL East team over those guys.
Yeah. It's about talent. Like, in a 1-game sample, I think that's when you really see, like, what matters in talent. And I think just the talent there is just overwhelming. Because correct me if I'm like, I forget which postseason it was, Dame, but like a couple of years ago, the Yankees and A's, were they not the wild card, Dame? Like, and the Yankees destroyed them.
The Yankees spanked them in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, in a 1-game sample, that's most likely where talent will shine, and the talent of any of those teams would definitely shine above the rest. So that concludes our AL talk. There, we definitely, so from all intensive purposes, we have the Yankees and the Blue Jays as the likely wild card matchup. And again, that'd be an entertaining one. Garrett Cole versus that lineup, I think that'd be must watch, because I think Garrett Cole, like in a 1-game sample, he can deliver that vintage game. So I would definitely want to see that. Moving on to the National League now. Let's talk about teams that, pitching's going to matter here coming up. Let's talk about the closest division first here, Dame. Well, actually, no. Let's go. Let's kind of do
There's 2 close divisions and one kind of runaway one.
Right. So let me actually go with the runaway one first. The NL Central, right? The Milwaukee Brewers currently lead that. They are 85-55 on the season. The next closest team is the 74-66 Cincinnati Reds. Now, the only way the Brewers lose this is a collapse game. I believe going back to our preseason, I think we both kind of looked more towards the St. Louis Cardinals as the team that we thought would take this division, or at least like towards this point have first. Maybe not as overwhelming as Milwaukee does, but ultimately, like, what has made Milwaukee so good to this point, Dane? Because they are the only other team in the National League overall that has more than 80 wins. They have 85, but they're the only NL team that has more than 80 wins aside from the Dodgers and the Giants. Hell, they're the only NL team with more than 75 wins aside from those two teams. Like, what has made the Brewers so good right now?
It's their pitching. Like, I think Colin Burns is at the top of the National League in ERA, and their other starters are also in the top 10. Like, I think they have 4 starters in the top 10 at ERA. Like, that's what's been carrying them. And of course, they have Josh Hader at the end of the pen. Their hitting is good enough when you have pitching like that. And when your pitching dominates, gives up 1 or 2 runs every game, and you have Josh Hader close the door, like, you don't need much from your offense. Like, it's not a bad offense, don't get me wrong, but if it had, say, the pitching of the Boston Red Sox, like, this wouldn't be a good team. But the fact that their starting pitching has been so elite and so consistent, their offense is getting away with a lot, which brings them to the record that they do have, 85 wins, which is a lot, from a team that we didn't expect to be at the top of this division before the season.
Right. And I think when it comes to that, ultimately at the end of the day, just like we talk about pitching, and I think the pitching is what mattered here with Milwaukee compared to the other teams, because Cincinnati and St. Louis, the pitching just didn't match it. Like, there's some really good hitters in St. Louis, right? We talked about it with Paul Goldschmidt, with Nolan Arenado, but at the end of the day, it's just simply about that Milwaukee. They took it to another level this season, when a lot of people probably thought, like, going into this year, Dame, we weren't the only two. I think a lot of people were kind of down on the Brewers coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I might have them even third in the division, to be honest. I just didn't think they were a good enough team because of the pitching, and the pitching has been absolutely amazing.
Right, and run differential as well. They're only one of 2 teams in the NL Central with a positive run differential, and they're like I said, like, just keep going on the trend of being up there with the Giants and Dodgers. They're the only other team in the NL overall with a plus 100 at least differential in, runs scored and runs allowed. Of course, we all know who number 1 is there, but we'll get to that team in a couple moments here. But yeah, NL Central just run away. Cincinnati, like, I'll say this, I kind of feel bad for the Reds, because in a normal year, like 74-66, like, maybe they could kind of compete for a wild card spot, and they are technically speaking for the second wild card, but just when you look at who the top wildcard team is set to be, like, you just feel so bad for them. It's like it's going to end up being that Yankees Athletics game, Dame. They're just going to get slaughtered. they're just going to get slaughtered here. So moving past that, let's get to the competitive divisions here. Dame, I'll let you start the discourse here. Who do you want to talk about first, the NL East or the NL West? And kind of like your thoughts about whichever division as we head into the final, stretch of games.
Let's do NL West first because I do think this is. I wouldn't say it's the best division in baseball, but they do have the best two teams record wise in the entire league,
Right.
with the Giants and the Dodgers. And talk about surprising teams, like the Giants are the most surprising team of all. They have the best record in the entire league when a lot of us, including myself, thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the league. I just personally think it's all because of the manager. The manager has made so many great decisions, and he's really got the best out of all his players. On the pitching staff with Kevin Gausman, Logan Webb, the second half of the season, and their hitting has been so great situationally, which is why they have the best record in the league. Now, I do think the Dodgers will end up winning this division. They're only a game behind, and I will give them the edge based off that, but I do think the Giants are going to be a force to be reckoned with come the playoffs, because if the Giants go in the wild card, I think they'll beat any team that's going to be the second wild card, and then that will set up for a Dodgers-Giants in the first round. And I think that's going to be an amazing series. I think it's going to go 0-5. You see, all their games this season have been really great games. So I think the Dodgers are going to end up hosting that one. I think the Giants are going to beat whoever. I don't know who. I don't have a prediction yet based off who the second wild card game will be. Team will be, but I do think it will end up being in the first round. The Dodgers or Giants, one way or another.
Yeah, I think the division race between those two is so close. Like, and kind of to your point, like this isn't necessarily the best division in the league. I think we already talked about it in the AL East, just like 1 through 4, like just how good that is. Yeah. But if you're talking about the top two, like there's no better top two in Major League Baseball this season. The Giants 89-50, the Dodgers 88-51. If very realistic, both teams could actually get to 100 wins. I don't know. I don't think there are too many games they have against one another. And in fact, actually, from when I'm looking at the schedule, they don't face one another for the rest of the season. From what I'm looking at here, so these two teams could realistically get to 100+ wins, and one of them will be the wild card. And that would that not be the strongest wild card team of any era, man? Like, oh, good lord!
It happened a couple years ago when the Red Sox had over 100 wins. They won the division, and then the Yankees also won 100 games in the wild card. I think that was the year with the A's.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. So it's very rare to see a team like that, have to settle for the wild card, but that is likely going to happen here between the two of them. I think overall, like you said, I think it's destiny that we're going to get Giants and Dodgers come the NLDS. I just think, like you said, the question is who's going to be the first seed, who's going to be the fourth seed, right? Like who's going to end up having home field advantage. Myself personally, I actually think it's going to be the Dodgers, because I think it's just something about the Dodgers and performing late in the season. Like, look at the last 5 years of them doing that. Like there's just a knack for them. And now that they've won the championship, like I think there's a different switch there. So myself personally, I'm giving the edge here to the Dodgers to ultimately take the division. But if the Giants do, like it wouldn't be the complete, final bow, because I think the final bow for them would be winning the World Series going into this year, which would be crazy. But I think overall, just it'd be a nice bow for the Giants if they could get it, but I just think like the Dodgers are just like, it's a different mentality, but great for the Giants. So like we said, one of them is going to be the NL wild card winner, is going to be the top seed in the NL wild card. Let's talk about who else could be there. Like I said, the Cincinnati Reds are kind of competing here at 74-66. The Padres are at 73-65. Sort of disappointing late into the season here.
Yo, they fell off so much. They were on neck and neck with the Dodgers and Giants, and now they're 15.5 games back from the Dodgers and Giants. It's crazy.
Yeah, they, out of anyone, I think this second half of the season, it's definitely hurt them the most in terms of, missing a couple guys, yes, but also just not performing to the same level. Like I was talking about, run differential earlier. They only have a plus 70 run differential compared to the Giants at plus 154 and the Dodgers at plus 224. Like it's very crazy. But the reason why I'm bringing up the Padres this early in the Reds is because now let's move on to the final division here, Dame. The NL East. The Atlanta Braves, the Philadelphia Phillies, and the New York Mets are still vying for that division. The Braves have 73, the Phillies have 71, the Mets have 70. The reason why I'm kind of combining this with the wild card is because whoever, like the two teams that don't win, like they need to keep winning at the very least to try to compete for the wild card spot. Dame, is there any chance that there's a second NL East team aside from the division winner? Or do you think it'll just end up being like that one? Essentially, let me try to say this a little bit better. Aside from the division winner, is there going to be another NL East team that makes it as the second wild card? And if not, who do you give the edge for the division to?
I don't think another team is making it. Like, this division is so bad. Although they were the hyped up division before the season, that we thought there were gonna be maybe 3 teams from this division in the playoffs. But this division has been such a disappointment. You're just getting teams going over 500. Like, most of the season, there was only 1 or 2 teams hovering around 500. Now, I'm gonna go with the Braves to win the division. I before the season, I think I want the Braves to win the division. I just think they're the most talented based on their pitching and hitting. I know they lost Robert Acuna, and that really sucks. But they just have the good enough depth in their lineup to make up for that loss. And their pitching is good. Their bullpen's all right. And really, a lot of it just has to do with the fact that the Phillies and the Mets really suck. I was high on the Mets before the season, but just so much has gone wrong for that team, from their owner just tweeting way too much. DeGrom's injury, their hitting hasn't been as good. They want to start a war against their fans. They kind of hate their fans. That's kind of weird to me, but and the Phillies they're just an alright team that I can't really trust. Their bullpen really sucks. I like their manager. I like Bryce Harper, but other than that, like, there's not much to like about that team, which is why I'm just gonna go with the safe pick and go with the Braves as a division winner. But I just don't think the Phillies and the Mets are good enough to win that wild card. If they're gonna make it to the playoffs, it's gonna be by the division. I don't think it's gonna be by a wild card, because I do think the Padres, Reds, and Cardinals are all better than them, and they have a lot more teams to jump in the wild card than they do in the division.
Right. I think we're only going to get the one team in that division. I don't see, and even the one team will get, like, all things considered, the winner of that division is going to face the Milwaukee Brewers. I think we can agree that the Brewers are going to win that series, like, in a best of 5. Unless the Braves pitching continues to just play at a different level, which they've kind of had to do here in order to get to this point, because Charlie Morton even got like a 1-year extension by the Atlanta Braves for how he's performed in the second half of this season. Like, you need to bring it up at a different level in the playoffs, and the question is, like, who could potentially do that here? And the Braves technically, but the inconsistency they had this season, like you said, being just barely at 500 for most of the year before getting above, and now this has been the best that they've been at so far this season with this record, like 9 games above 500. Like, they haven't been that much higher. Like we said, the Brewers are at 85. The Dodgers and the Giants both may get to 100. The Braves, at their current pace, they can't. I don't even think they could get 80. No, actually, no, they could. They could. My bad. They could get 80, but, like, they're not strong. They're not overwhelming in any way compared to the other teams. They get overwhelmed by everyone else. Essentially, like, whoever wins the NL East, like, it just feels like they're a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
to the Milwaukee Brewers there. In terms of the wild card, so we'll kind of close out the discussion here. So, assuming it's going to be Dodgers or Giants as the top wild card, like you said, it's Padres, Reds. For the time being, assuming things hold, Phillies, Cardinals, and Mets. Those are the next 5 teams for when it comes to the second wild card. Now, when it comes to whoever would have to face the Dodgers or the Giants, aside from the Padres, which, yes, they've had their rough second half of the year, Dame, but we still think, like, just on a talent basis, they can match up to those teams way better than these other teams on paper. Do you think any of these other teams, like, could any of the rest be any kind of challenge to the Giants or the Dodgers? Or does it just come down to the fact that we want the Padres to make it to the playoffs because we don't think any of these teams would give any kind of good game?
No, I don't think any team, including the Padres, are going to give any challenge to the Dodgers or Giants. I think the Dodgers, Giants are going to win regardless, and that matchup is locked in for the first round to me. It's just a matter of who's going to be home, like who's going to be wild card, who's going to be the division winner. But my prediction would be that it will be the Padres. I just have to believe in them and that talent that they do have on that roster, and I'm just hoping, because I do think they're a really excited team, and they always have exciting games with the Dodgers and the Giants. So I'm hoping and I'm predicting that they will be the second wild card. Tied for right now with the Reds, and I think they'll hold them off going late into the season. But yeah, that's what I got.
Right, and ultimately, I'm with you there. My wild card, like, my thing with the wild card, I just want, like, it to be a competitive game. So I want us to have Yankees, Blue Jays in the AL, and I want us to have either, Giants or Dodgers against the Padres, because I just don't think any of these teams can compete in a 1-game sample, unless maybe if the Mets somehow make a run here and get the second wild card spot. I don't know how realistic that is. I mean, they're 3.5 back, right? But unless the Mets can make just a massive run here, and get to that point, and have DeGrom there. That's the thing. It'd have to be a healthy DeGrom going up against the Giants or the Dodgers. That'd be the only thing that I think could give the Mets a chance there. Aside from that, like, there's no one else that matches on the level with those teams. Like, the Padres are the only one. And like we said, we kind of have been disappointed. So kind of last question here, Dan, when it comes to the Padres, what realistic chances do you give them to win a wild card game over either the Giants or the Dodgers?
It's extremely slight, but it wouldn't be zero like I would give these other teams below them. And it wouldn't be zero because they've seen the Giants and Dodgers so many times because they're on a division. They play like 18 times a year, which is why I'd give them a slight chance. But that's about it. They've just been so disappointing. Maybe the first half of the season, I would have given them a better chance, maybe even the favorites. But just the way they've been playing the second half is so mysterious to me because I don't understand how a team with so much talent can be so disappointing. But very slight because they're so familiar with both these teams that they could play in the wild card.
Right, and I'm kind of with you there. I think ultimately we would favor the Giants or the Dodgers in a similar way where we're going to favor whoever the Yankees are going to end up facing in the wild card. But I just think at the end, the talent discrepancy is there. While the Padres would match better compared to most, I think we're ultimately going to see a true battle of powerhouses in that NLDS. Like you said, Giants, Dodgers, I think it's destined to go to 5. I just think it's destined. Just like if we get Rays and Yankees, I think that could go to 5 as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. So that wraps up our Major League Baseball talk on this show. And that wraps up this week's episode of the pod as well. First, still could potentially be only episode without Chris, but let's just say the first of 2 or 3 without Chris. Dame, I think we did a good job holding the ship down.
You did a fantastic job.
Oh, man. So, of course, like I said at the top, Chris will be back soon. He's just handling some things. Everything is going to be fine. The show is going to be back. The Three Amigos will return soon. But for now, like I said, me and Dame are going to hold it down. And hey, we may have like a guest or two on in the coming weeks. I could try to pull some strings here. Maybe we get someone on next week's show, have a little bit more fun with us because we will be reacting, Dame. This is what next week's going to be fun. We're going to be reacting to the results from week 1 of the NFL season. That's going to be exciting.
I'm so excited.
It's football season, boys, and the Somewhat Sports Podcast, we're ready for it. And like I said last week, and I think the week before, make sure to be checking on the Instagram for updates because we're definitely going to be posting some stuff about our thoughts on the NFL games, week by week as it goes. Speaking of the Instagram, you can follow us at somewhat.sports on Instagram, and you can also find us on WordPress, and of course, the YouTube channel to listen to the pod, somewhat spacebar and then sports. And you guys know the beautiful logo we have, the 2 S's there. It's just chef's kiss right there. It really is just amazing. But guys, thank you all for listening in to this week's episode. We had a blast. We hope all of you did too. And we will be back next week. Will we have Chris? Find out next time on the Somewhat Sports Podcast.